You know, I was talking to Candice, also known as Candy. She's like sort of putting on this big whole shindig here. And we were saying, you know, I went to the OFS the other day, and like candy bars are like $4 each or something. What a bummer. Gosh, when all these punk rockers are in town, and they're going around like panhandling for change, they're never going to get $4 for a candy bar. We should try to get some candy that isn't $4 at the theater. So we got in touch with the manager here, Patty Kovacs, who's been a perfect angel in every way. And we went down to the supply store. We picked up some of these Ferrero Pan. Vegan candies. In the lobby, only a quarter. There's Mr. Melon. There's Johnny Apple Treats. Jawbreaker. Ooh, hold on a minute. Any Aerosmith fans in the audience? Boston Baked Beans. Alexander the Grape. Fruit Cocktail Imperials. And of course, everyone's favorite, lemon heads. Oh, but wait. Jelly beans too. But I want you to know that for those of you that can't afford a quarter for Ferrero Pan box of candies, we have the little Chico sticks, 10 cents each, okay? 10 cents for these, all right? For a few big spenders, we got a case, a very special case of Idaho Spuds.
The first time I remember meeting Calvin was at a New Year's Eve party. It was December 31st, 1980. It was at a friend's house in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just north of the city here. It was snowing a lot. I remember that we were at this party and Calvin was there. I may have seen him before, I don't remember, but he was not really from here, but had been around for some reason. I didn't really know who he was. I did know that. I think he had, but I do remember, I believe he had a pink bandana tied around his ankle or something, you know, something that was sort of, kind of like, just didn't seem like right, particularly given that era, like what was going on, that no one in their right mind would wear a pink bandana.
I remember seeing him, he gave a little spiel on stage about candy bar, about the different candy bars that you buy when you're on the road. I think it was an Idaho Spud or something, which is something you can only get out there in the Midwest and certain gas stations.
I just was kind of thinking about this part of the country, had never been here before, and my high school friend Shannon had actually borrowed a t-shirt from her that said the Evergreen State College on it, and people would say, like, what is that? I'd be like, I don't know. I finally asked her one day, and she was like, she looked really embarrassed. She was like, oh, my uncle went there. It's kind of like, oh, they don't have grades. And I was like, oh, no grades? Awesome. You know, so he had actually given her a catalog, and when I looked through it, I thought, oh, this is really great.
well, basically I was homeless here. And through a youth job thing, I arranged to get a job at Chaos, becoming the first full-time paid staff member at Chaos for 3 months at minimum wage, whatever that was at that time.
I think it's impossible to overestimate the influence of John Foster, who started as a Chaos DJ in 1975 at the Evergreen State College radio station, and started something called the Lost Music Network, which was a confederation of people across the country who were interested in promoting, advocating independent label music. And that whole idea was revolutionary at the time because no one was making that distinction between major and independent. So he was a real pioneer, and he got this network going. And after a while, he started this addition to the program guide of Chaos, which reviewed independent label records and things like that. And that was called OP. And the whole idea was it was Lost Music Network, LMN, and OP was OP, so it was LMNOP. And later on, Calvin Johnson started a label called K, which was the other end of that sequence of the alphabet. So that's one theory about where that came from. I think that's the right one.
Because I wanted everyone to discover all this great music, whether they were interested or not. I came up with the idea of the green line policy at Chaos, which is the policy that says that 80% of music played should be independent records. I put a green line on the ones on independent records, across the spine.
We also taught a course, and I became involved in that as a volunteer and teaching people from the community how to do radio and stuff like that. That's how we met Calvin, by the way, was he came and took that course one year.
They encouraged us, well, come on by, just, check out the record library, do it, just get to know the station. So we would often go there after school and just hang out in the record library and listen to stuff. And all of a sudden, here's this record library with, everything I'd ever read about but never been able to listen to.
I met Calvin when he was looking for jazz records in the library. It was very funny.
Why was that funny?
Oh, because he was such an asshole, It was sort of his trip back then. He was a professional asshole. And he had spiked hair and lime green girl watcher glasses, with the slit. And it was 1979, and I just tried to say hi, and and for years, I've had all kinds of friends go, I just tried to say hi to him, and I go yeah, so what, so did he say hi back? And, well, yeah, but it was hi, or whatever, and I was just no, it's fine.
All of a sudden they were like, oh, do you want a show? Well, how about Tuesday from 2 to 6? And my first show was 4 or 6 hours long or something crazy. And then it was oh, okay. And then okay, then what about Wednesday too? From it's 2 days in a row, these really long shows where I had hours to fill. And
I remember when I first started my radio experience there, a couple of people were warning you about Calvin, and they were saying, he just likes to be tough. He just likes to be mean. One day, he came in, he started a show at 7 o'clock, and you're supposed to run the news, the Pacifica News, and Calvin just said, well, I'm not going to run the news today. Let's just get going. And he didn't run the news. And that was sort of Calvin being a punk. We were all the older punk rockers or wannabes or whatever that had, the cool records, the radio show. John had the magazine, everybody had bands, and we wanted a scene, and we wanted to be legitimate, but there weren't any real life children in our scene. So in many ways, Calvin was our lone youth.
Op magazine had a whole section just devoted to cassette releases. And I think part of the flowering of the cassette world was the fact that it would get reviewed somewhere, and you might be able to sell a couple hundred of them. Op was very funny. John Foster was clearly very hung up on the alphabet because the first Op was all artists whose names began with A, and the next one was B. And right around P, I think he vowed that he would stop at Z, and he did. And he went and joined the Peace Corps.
It was a way a brain like mine could deal with the sheer volume of information coming in. I could just focus on one letter at a time.
I loved Op magazine. I mean, that was a magazine that I read when I was really young and kept reading it until it finally wound down. And there's so many people who I never would have known about had I not read about them in Op magazine. And
I mean, it's probably horrible to to be John Foster and hear people like me say, you know, gosh, he was perfect. But I mean, he really, you know, he conducted himself in every respect like a hero, like somebody who, you know, you would hope to try to be more like. And on meeting Calvin, and I can't remember a particular incident, but, you know, picking up that he was enthusiastic about punk rock and what it was beginning to occur to me that punk rock was not simply a style of, you know, like that it was the music that killed plants, but that punk rock was something that you could do.
Back burner is on fire. Freeze dry, clean, then retire. Yeah, that top coat's overdue. Yeah, gotta get a new haircut too. Yeah, who says dreams don't come true? Whoa, got a new thing flashing through. Set wood top over tower. Hope drop, don't go sour. Yeah, backseat step over jewel. Yeah, heard about that on the news. Yeah, can't stop that lopsy-do. Whoa, got a new thing flashing through.
But they're great. I mean, Calvin has a great voice, and that's what sets him apart from, you know, countless other indie bands. He's like very charismatic and a great singer.
Lee Hazelwood, Johnny Cash, The Cramps, and a crucial, you know, there you have it. That speed happening.
Shotgun shot to the other side, other side, other side, other side. Your side has a favorite color. Your side is turning to box brown. My side wants to call it over and keep you from running out of bounds. Other side, other side.
In the Olympia rock scene, from the moment I moved here, it was always understood that punk rock was about, if you can think of it and it's a cool thing and it's a good thing to do, then just do it. There's no rules. And yet elsewhere there'd always seem to be these rules. You know, a rock band is supposed to be a bass player and a drummer and a guitar player and a singer, and they're supposed to do it like this. And if you only had you know, you had to dress this certain way and play with a certain amount of distortion, then you qualified as punk rock, you know? Not three people playing surf music, you know, instrumental surf music with no drummer. You know, that's not punk rock. But to me, that was more punk than the legions of hardcore bands who sounded all the same.
I lived in the Ray, and when we first started playing together, and so we recorded some stuff in my apartment in the Ray, and then I moved into Martin, where Bret lived, and I got an apartment there, and we recorded some stuff there. We recorded some stuff in Heather's apartment in the Thompson. Just, you know, put a blaster in the middle of the room and let loose. So we played some parties, and then we thought, okay, well, this is working out, you know. Laura and Heather and I, we all ran through a few tunes, and then we thought maybe we should sit down and practice and make up some songs. Because we'd done these shows without doing anything. We're just like, we're going to play at the party. Okay. And we hadn't even played together. And it was pretty exciting. So it was kind of improv, you know. So I dug that, did some recording. But then Laura was like, oh, I'm going to move to Seattle. I don't know. So she moved out. Bret had moved to town, and he just seemed like a good person to work with. So we said, hey, why don't you come and do this?
And Calvin didn't ask me to be in a band with him because I'd blown him away with my chops. You know, it was. I think he just like, oh, I want to be in a band with Bret. People want what they expect, and we weren't what they expected, and so some people would be, depending on the venue, some people would be like, oh wow, this isn't what we expected, and we're excited about it. Other people would be like, this isn't what we expected, and we're pissed about it.
I think the first, time I heard them or saw them, they were a little too kind of, aesthetically, the sort of jangly kind of like primitive, like no bass, that didn't really work too well for me initially.
With the records and the tapes, you only get one part. On stage, he's so funny, so charismatic, and so confident in ways that the average person, I don't think, can really ever match.
Beat Happening was very obscure through most of their career, and then it only got to be around, I think, the IPU festival, that things really started to go over. I think Dreamy was the first album that really got any big notice. I think, and Gerard Cosloy at his fanzine Conflict was the guy who really cheerleaded them early on.
That was a magazine I published between 1979 and 1990. It was a self-published, self-edited fanzine that for the bulk of its existence I did most of the writing, but there were later on in the magazine's tenure there were other people who came to write for it as well. But
so seeing Beat Happening, and seeing the way that Calvin performed, and seeing just how intense their performance was, and their songs are so crazy. Just guitar, drums, and Calvin singing like these kind of weird campfire songs.
And the fact that all three of them sang, and the fact that they didn't have a bass player, I mean, that was all pretty interesting. I mean, this sort of doesn't exactly reek of ambition,
MacKaye was one of the few. I mean, MacKaye did so many great cassettes early on. They were one of the few labels that did it right because the music was good, the packaging was really interesting and really original, and there was always some sort of a theme.
The first compilation we did was The Danger Is Their Business, which was something that I'd sort of had this idea, and Rich Jensen was kind of like, we got to do that. He kind of was like the one who was like, that has to happen.
And that whole store, just, records and bins, but then there's this display on the wall with these like 9 little plastic slots, just clear plastic, and there's cassettes, like Let's Together, Let's See, and then there's a bunch of K cassettes and the Beat Happening 7-inch, and it was up on the wall, so it seemed important. So I bought it, and that was the first. That's before I'd ever seen a live punk rock band or anything. I just bought that single because it was on the wall.
When Kay first started, they had like the cassette revolution. Like he talked a lot of, like he had a little comic about the independent music people making cassettes, and it's the cassette revolution. And then I remember Steve Fisk telling me that when Kay started making 7-inch records, and he asked Calvin, hey, what's with all the 7-inch records? What happened to the cassette revolution? And Calvin's like, oh, didn't you hear? We won.
We were really naive to go over there, and that's why we went, because we were naive. And you could say brash and try to think that was positive, but we were lucky to find ourselves taken care of once we got there by the family that essentially adopted us for the 2 months we were there. And they found us an apartment, and we did a lot of stuff on our own. Calvin especially. I mean, he was there doing research, finding labels and the Japanese punk scene.
Oh, that was the idea for the Japan trip. It was, hey, Bret, why don't you join Beat Happening and we'll go to Japan. So, yeah, that took a few months to organize, but we finally got there.
People had told me when we came back from Japan and played, it was very noticeable that we had been concentrating, that we'd been living together and concentrating on being a band for 2 months. Because at no time before or since did we spend that amount of time together concentrating on music.
I really thought that what I was seeing was important enough to document it.
Greg Sage is in a band called the Vipers, and when they played in Olympia in '83, and Laura, Heather, and Calvin opened for them. We played. There was like 3 Olympia bands, and the Vipers played. And actually, I interviewed him on Chaos that afternoon and talked to him, just kind of met him, and then he saw us play, and he was like, "Oh, you guys are great," whatever. And it was kind of cool to have him compliment us. But then later, I met up with him, and he was like, "I'd love to record you guys if you want to record." I was like, "Wow, that'd be exciting."
And needless to say, that was pretty much the end of my experience as a recording engineer.
We did 4 songs with him, and that was in December of '83, and that ended up being the songs on our first single and on our first album and stuff.
He sets up and proceeds to record the songs, and they do the takes, and then then he says, "See ya," and he gets in his van and he rides off into the sunset. And it was just so cowboy heroic. It was just crazy.
We spent an afternoon and an evening in the studio, in this room. It wasn't a studio. It was just a practice room where they brought the equipment in. And something magical happened on that afternoon for me. And I think the music bears that out too. But I heard the music and I was like, wow, we're capable of this. I hadn't thought of the band before then as anything beyond just kind of a challenge to myself and something fun to do with these friends in this context of this community where people were getting on stage and doing stuff.
First time we worked with him really defined a lot of things for me about what recording should be, like doing the 4-track stuff. Because he showed up with an Echoplex and a Neumann microphone. And then he took it from there.
It's funny because as lo-fi as the aesthetic is, you know, that's like a real like Beatles Abbey Road way to record records. You know, with an 8-track and a couple great old tube mics and just moving them around the room till things sound good and stuff like that.
I don't know if my brother mentioned to you, I think his student loans helped pay for the first Beat Happening record, and the ability to put out vinyl, and then the response they got once they put that out. I remember he gave me a bunch of their first singles to sell at school, and I tried to sell them and no one wanted them.
You know, there's this hand-drawn record company, it's called K Records, which like, what the hell does that mean? You know, I mean, after you know, record companies named after stores, you know, there's plenty of those, and record companies named after, you know, people's houses or, you know, friends or whatever. I mean, you know, Joe's Records kinds of things. And then all of a sudden it's K Records. And I was just like, what could possibly be any more oblique?
When I put this store together, Calvin was working with Girl City a couple doors down, and then he would be bringing in cassettes and 7-inch singles and finally full-length LPs back in 82, 83, all the way up until CDs came out. And then he started bringing in CDs, and we started selling. Well, we can begin with some of his vinyl that has been reissued and surfacing now on CD.
Calvin is a great networker, and I think that's another thing that really, really distinguishes him is that he could make these connections, reach out to people. He connected with Ian MacKaye, connected with Sonic Youth, you know, basically through, you know, letters and phone calls and making connections.
K is a highly seductive letter in the alphabet, if you know what I mean. If you put a K on things, it will sell. It's a marketing theory. Also, K originated as a cassette. You don't look convinced. A cassette label. And K, as we all know, is the first letter of the word cassette.
The year that Calvin was a senior in high school, and I'm guessing that was 78 or 9, Calvin's family moved to Washington, D.C. I'm just guessing, but he worked, when he was in Washington, D.C. that year, he worked at a theater.
It was on DuPont Circle.
Called the K.P. Janis Theater, and they had a funky little logo that was the letter K inside a shield.
I remember visiting Calvin in D.C. once and we picked him up at work, and he was cleaning out the popcorn machine. He had a little red jacket that was from these theaters, and it had a little shield with a K inside.
There is that de-emphasis on macho behavior and the fluidity of gender roles and in that whole scene, and yet you do have this very typical situation where the male half of the label is very much the dominant figurehead, the peacock, as it were. And Candice is, you know, the behind-the-scenes person who gets, you know, a lot of the very unglamorous work done, and is just as essential to the success of that label as anyone else.
She's got a lot of tenacity, you know? So she's a force to be reckoned with. She has definitely kept things going through a lot of hard times.
We're partners. I mean, I'm not. We're equals, I guess, is the difference. And not that there was any sense of like, you know, that Calvin somehow treated me as if I was a servant or anything like that. Not to imply that, but I've just
I created my own spot, and and that's a really important spot.
Lo-fi is somewhat of a misnomer, I think, especially when you talk about beat happening, because except for that first record, the fidelity is pretty good. The highs are crisp, the lows are punchy. What lo-fi has come to mean is kind of wobbly playing and not playing in tune and singing a little flat or something like that. That's what lo-fi is. Steve Fisk is a very, very excellent engineer, and those records were well recorded.
There's a whole thing, for me personally, that's really important. That's not putting your fingerprints on the record that you make. You should make a record for a band, and it should be defined by the band and what the band wants, and eventually it's the band's money. And I think Steve and I think alike on that subject, that it's really important that you create a thing for an album that is defined by the band and album rather than by you enforcing some idea of how records are made or something like that.
We didn't have a lot of really good mics, and Calvin's got a real weird kind of quacky thing that happens when he hits A sounds, flat A sounds, bad seeds, the A sound would reach out and ruin the microphone. It would just make it sound like distortion. It wasn't even distortion, it was just part of his throat rattling or something like that.
On certain beat happening records, they are really specific about, for instance, editing songs and stuff like that. Like taking a finished 6-minute song and using parts of it that mean something and discarding parts that don't. I mean, I can remember doing digital edits on a beat happening song that Steve was recording, and it was incredibly specific.
There was a couple songs on Jamboree they wanted to record outside, so they went out in this little balcony we had. And, we had half the people inside and half the people outside. And there were claves, and it was just it was a lot of just letting them do what they wanted to do and deliberately not asking them to change guitar sounds, or if something was too dull or too bright from the amplifier, you just dealt with it inside, because I don't know if we had the common ground worked out where I could step in and tell them, oh, you ought to try it like this, or you ought to try it like that. Not that I knew, I just had an opinion, and I was recording a very unconventional sounding band.
Calvin, coming from Washington, D.C., if you think about beat happening, there is that go-go beat that drives beat happening. And that, well, what do I know about music history? But that is I would say a pretty black sounding beat. Comes from DC, go-go.
Still I'm all alone. You got me caught, let go my heart. Oh, give me a sign that you'll be mine. I got a crush on you, got a crush on you. You won't let me through. I got a crush on you, I got a crush on you, got a crush on you. What am I to do? I got a crush on you. So you're flying your plane, driving me insane. Hit me with a bone till I'm all alone. You driving that car, saw his arm, saw that black ass tar. Must be your heart. I got a crush on you, I got a crush on you. What am I to do? I got a crush on you, I got a crush on you, got a crush on you. Making me so blue, I got a crush on you. Pandora's box has got a lock. I'm gonna knock, gonna beat the clock. I won't rest until Pandora's chest has been upset, because I'm the one. I got a crush on you, got a crush on you. You won't let me through. I got a crush on you, I got a crush on you, got a crush on you. I can't relax, old Mr. Scratches on my back, made a devil's pact, trading old black cat for a witch's brew. Satan, seven sins and you, I got a crush on you, I got a crush on you. You will let me through, I got a crush on you, got a crush on you, making me so blue. I got a crush on you, what am I to do? Got a crush on you.
Well, Dreamy was an interesting thing where Calvin talked me into recording 4-track in my apartment, which actually was my storefront. That's on the album cover. That's that door there in front of. And Pat loaned me a bunch of gear, or actually loaned Calvin a bunch of gear, and then didn't tell Calvin not to plug this into that or that into this. And it was one of those days when I was a real jerk with Calvin because everything was blowing up, and I realized he talked me into doing something that really wasn't a good idea. But it worked out really well, and that's the 4-track stuff on Dreamy.
Beat Happening and Calvin in general were so into this idea of naivete, returning to kind of a childlike state. And yet, I mean, if you listen to their music, most of the lyrics are about some very dark adult situations. And the music behind it is, quote-unquote naive or quote-unquote primitive. But I think that's a wonderful metaphor. I mean, it just shows that, adult life is just as confusing and make it up as you go along as you were when you were a kid. It's just that life is a little bit more complicated. That's all. And I think that's one of their gifts.
Well, I just remember thinking when Black Candy came out how it was about evil. And it was about, sex. It was about drugs.
It's like the knocking on heaven's door of indie rock. Everybody has to do it.
This is one of the first songs I've heard that Calvin had that was covered by other people that more people heard by other bands than by Calvin's Beat Happening. But once Calvin's songwriting got out there and they found out who the originator of that song, who wrote it, and found out it was Calvin and he was a member of the band Beat Happening, people were paying more attention to that.
I prefer Calvin. I prefer the Beat Happening version to my version on that single.
Well, to be honest, I was aware of Beat Happening by name only and hadn't heard anything they did, and I heard that song first by Dean Wareham, who did a cover of it, a solo cover of it, and I just really liked the song. I thought it was a really great song, and I really liked the way that Dean had done it. And then I found out, I think from Dean, that it was a Beat Happening song. And I heard their version. And to be honest, I didn't like it that much. It's in a much lower register and stuff. And it just didn't appeal as much.
Breakfast in cemetery, boy tasting wild cherry, touch girl apple blossom, just a boy playing possum. We'll come back for Indian summer, we'll come back for Indian summer, we'll come back for Indian summer. The bird went. What is that cheerful sound? Rain falling on the ground. We'll wear a jolly crown. Buckle up, we're wayward bound. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer, then go our separate ways. I touch your hem, you say, let's stroll down Martin Way, pick plums, abandoned farm. Who let norms come to harm? We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer, then go our separate ways. Cover me with rain, walk me down the lane. I'll drink from your drain. We will never change, no matter what they rain. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer and go our separate ways. Motorbike to cemetery, picnic on wild berries, French toast with molasses, croquet and baked Alaskas. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer. We'll come back for Indian summer. Cover me with rain.
From Vancouver, Canada, Crevice, Revolution Girl Style now.
I remember going out to the IPU convention and just, it was the most amazing thing. I mean, there was just nothing ever like this. It was so much fun. It was like days and days of just going to see bands play. They had like morning shows, lunchtime shows, and then evening shows at a couple of different venues. Olympia is so tiny that it only had like 5 venues at the time. But like all the bands were like very early in their career. Some of them, I mean, I'm pretty sure Bratmobile did their first ever gig there. The Spinanes did their first ever gig there. And just the mood was unbelievable. I mean, I went really not knowing what to expect. I went as a journalist with really very, very poor connections in this field. I didn't really know anybody else that was going. And then I got there and ran into a bunch of people that I knew from New York. And it turned out that this had been like the tribal gathering of '91. I mean, everyone who knew they should be there was.
It never occurred to me that it wouldn't happen. I just assumed it was. And pretty much everybody that I wanted to have play, all I had to do was say, hey, I'm doing this thing last week of August. You should be there. And everyone's like, yeah. Just about everybody, except for Galaxy 500, I think was one of the few people who I'd asked who blew me off big time.
It was really hard work, and that's one of the things I remember the most. Finally getting to meet people was a thrill, to be able to and that was sort of the point, was to be able to get together and everybody all in one space to meet or to re-meet and to be kind of put together for a number of days, as opposed to like, hi, I'm going to talk to you and see you play, and then you're going to go. It was, it was like
contained.
It's a Capitol Theater, and when you play there, it's a very weird room because when you play theaters a lot of times, if you're on a stage, it's sort of behind the proscenium, like back in the stage. The sound there, you have like this 100-foot high ceiling, and the sound on stage is very odd because you don't have any of the compression of the room. Usually you have the sound bouncing right back from 15-foot high ceiling or whatever, or you're in the room literally, so the room sound is swirling around and coming back at you. But when you play theaters, in particular the Capitol Theater, when you play on stage, it's very dry. It's very dry. It's almost cold. You don't have any of that compression of a room because you have a 100-foot high ceiling above you with like ropes and all the curtains and all that stuff. But then the front of the house is like this. They have a whole different sensation because they have the PA and it's a theater which is acoustically treated, so it's just like this sound in the theater. So what's happening in the crowd a lot of times is really different than what's happening on stage. It's a very odd sensation. So that can be a hard show for us, but people seem to like it.
She did nothing to deserve
It just had this feeling to me. I'm like, okay, I know all I have to do is tell these people and they'll be here, and then, just sort of let people know and they'll come. And it just made sense. It just seemed like it all fit together, and I was like, well, there's certain kinds of things that I've always thought a show should be, and I'm going to make sure those are that way, and otherwise just want it to just be pretty easygoing.
He was in pretty high gear that whole week. He was really the mayor of Olympia.
Like, I was just in heaven that week. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever done, and it was amazing because I didn't know anyone. Right. Because I was totally anonymous, and I was just like, I went to every single show, and I took pictures. I was front and center at like every single show.
The interesting thing was that the musicians were mingling successfully with the audience. I would say having Mr. MacKaye there, Mr. Fugazi, doing the door one night at the theater was illuminating to people that this idolized character within the punk rock scene would actually stoop so low as to do the door. So it sort of broke down a few misconceptions about what the whole interaction within the music scene at that level is about.
I think I tore some. I mean, I was working the door to the show just because somebody else got sick, and I just stepped in and helped out. It was epic. I mean, I can't. Everybody was incredible. I do have a really defining memory though of the IPU the night we played, because I think L7 played before us, and I remember I was up in the balcony looking down, and it was just the most incredible scene watching them play.
I mean, I remember stuff like, Ian MacKaye being a ticket taker at the theater for one of the shows. Because the deal was that like everyone kind of pitched in. There was no security. There was no one running it except that Calvin and Candice had booked all the bands and the venues. But there was nobody like with a stopwatch going like, "You guys have been playing too long. Get off the stage now." There was really no sound man, I don't think. There were no ticket takers. Everyone took turns selling T-shirts, and then on the night before the last show, the Cat in the theater, I can't remember there's a movie theater which is used as a venue in Olympia. I can't remember what it's called. It's like the Paradise or the Olympia or the Supreme or something. There's a cat that lived inside there, and it pissed on all the T-shirts. And so on the last day, nobody could buy T-shirts because they all reeked of cat piss. But it was I mean, what more perfect thing could happen at a K convention than a cat pissing on T-shirts?
I think, for any movement like that, I think you have to have a figurehead and, a cult leader, a charismatic front person. And that would be Calvin Johnson.
In time, I came to realize that K itself was a very nurturing sort of label. And that was the sort of thing that impressed me the most about them.
If you're talking about friends working together, and I think that's what this is all about. I mean, I think K, ideally, it's the spirit of friendship. It's not so much about commerce and market share and how to, use the label as a battering ram to, buy someone a huge house someday. I mean, it's more about educating people about different types of music and helping your friends learn how to document their own stuff and get it out there to people. In a situation like that, a handshake is the coolest way of dealing with it.
I'm pretty well connected, I think, where the scuttlebutt goes. So if he'd ever screwed a band, or if he was a drug addict, or if he'd been involved in kind of shady deals, word kind of filters around. I think everybody knows who's the shysters out there and who's really just trying to help.
It's very instructive to compare the two mottos of Sub Pop and K. Sub Pop was world domination, and K was the international pop underground. And if you think about that, that world domination has got this very aggressive, we're going to take over thing, we're going to invade from our home base, and we're going to take you over, and we're going to bring you something that's not from your area and have it take over your area. Whereas the international pop underground assumed this kind of network. It was very non-invasive. It was sort of like, here, you're over there in Japan, and you're in DC, and we're all connected, and we're all on a team. And it was like a conspiracy rather than like an invasion. And I think the difference is really, really very telling.
Sub Pop is always joking about that, kind of like always since the beginning. It was like kind of a big tongue-in-cheek thing, that they would do things like, fly international press people over to like check out a bunch of bands that were playing at the Vogue to 10 people in Seattle and stuff like that. To me, K Records was every bit as big as A&M.
Well, I think the influence of K on the American independent scene is, vast. I think they showed, just on a business basis, they showed that you could sell, 2,000 copies of a release and make it work for you financially, keep coming out with records. That's a pretty crucial thing. They were part of a network which promoted and talked up other records. I think if you look in some of those old K catalogs, they often talk about other labels' records.
When I think back to I look back at records that I thought were amazing in 1978, and then I realized, God, there was really only one good song on this record, and they never made another record that was either, or they didn't make another record that was any good. But then you look at someone like Lois or Mecca Normal, Unwound. A lot of the people around here, they're just putting out great record after great record, and Mecca Normal's like that, and it's not just the same thing over and over again. It's they change and they grow and they learn, they build, and we worked on a lot of stuff together, and I learned a lot from them. definitely.
So we did a show in Olympia, and Calvin just gave us his Big Yellow album in exchange for our Big Green album. And I put it under the seat of the bus, and it proceeded to get warm, and the album proceeded to melt. But I played it when I got home, and I thought, pardon me? Didn't he recognize that we were like a hardcore punk rock band? He's giving me this album of piffle. So I said to the guy, what's up with this shit? And he said, well, no, he didn't. He wouldn't have tried to explain himself, would he?
No.
But subsequently, he came to Vancouver, and we bumped into each other. Well, no. We arranged to meet. Let's be honest here. We arranged to meet. And he put out our first single, which came after the first album. Talk about doing things backwards, eh? On K.
I bought the record, and I've never done this with any other band, but it was such a powerful moment. I had to do something to signify it, and so my friend Rich obviously knew them or something, I don't remember, and I was like, do you think that they would sign this album or whatever? And so he took me over to Gene and introduced me, and I never said a word. I was just scared shitless. I just held out the record, and he had to explain that I wanted her to autograph it, and she autographed it, and David autographed it, and that was that. And like when she tells the same story, she makes it sound pretty funny because she apparently thought I was retarded.
His lease expires when he dies. Janet bought the building just to tear it down. She couldn't check the rent controls that suitor found with such a sound. They found it sound. For Rudy to die. Janet's legal costs are rising. Rudy's ultimately buried his breast against the glass. I cried fighting glass, fighting glass. Waiting for Rudy. Microcosm of America on a corner where gas was sold. That bombs were shot down long ago. Waiting for Rudy. Microcosm of America. Where gas was sold. The bombs were shot down long ago.
Some of the same things I said about Calvin I could apply to Jean, that she's an absolutely fearless performer. You know, total pure guts, pure inspiration on stage. She's an amazing writer, an amazing songwriter. Nobody on earth has a voice like hers. I know it doesn't meet everyone's taste, but I think she has an incredible voice, an incredible range. And David is just, you know, one of the great punk rock guitar players ever. You know, I mean, I think of people like Greg Sage or Greg Ginn from Black Flag, and David's right up there with them. I mean, I think because it's a strange thing, because what Mecca Normal do is so relatively sparse. I mean, it's usually just the two of them. In recent years, they've added drums and added other instruments, but for some reason, I think people still think of them more as like a kind of like a performance thing, a performance art thing, as opposed to being a real band.
I admire all sorts of guitar players, from classical to to Jimi Hendrix to John Lee Hooker to Lightning Hopkins, or but I don't sit around and think about them, because I have my own limitations and strengths that I work within. My own parameters.
We weren't privy to the notion of pretension.
Yeah, that came later.
Yeah,
then we became pretentious.
We developed pretension later. Moved right in on pretension. But at that point, we were naive, with a K.
People have asked me many times, like, how did you get to be on K Records? And I don't ever really remember asking Calvin or having Calvin ask us. I don't really know. I really can't recall.
I met Lois because I was sort of hanging out with that crowd, because I was hanging out with Calvin. And the thing that struck me about Lois that I really appreciated was that, like, okay, these guys were all sort of hipster punk rocker types, and I had long hair and a beard, I think, and like I didn't feel like I was a hippie, but I didn't feel like cutting my hair just because I was now hanging out with people with short hair. And Lois was sort of like the first person to say, "Hey, who are you? Oh, what do you do? What are you doing here?" Like actually talking to me in a way that made me feel like more included. I walked up to Lois in the hallway at K and said, "So hey Lois, would you like to play music with me sometime?" And she said something like, I don't know. No, maybe.
Pat was like, if you ever want to play, give me a call sometime. And I was like, yeah, right, this hippie guy. And then I was like thinking about it later. I was like, fuck it, I've got all these songs, And so I thought, okay, well, I called Pat and we decided to get together and practice. And I was really charmed by, he came out, he put down a floor tom and a snare, and he sat down and he was ready. And I was like, awesome. Like, not a full kit. He was like, I think that this would be a good setup for the music that you play.
Lois would do this thing where every Valentine's Day she'd make up a photograph of herself that was really interesting. Like this one where she's sitting on a dune buggy, and the caption is Cupid Car Club, which is I think where that band got its name, or they got it from the same place. I don't really know. But she would on Valentine's Day she would always give out Valentines which were photographs of herself, and so I thought, oh well, here's one of my family, and I can make a video for her. So it was actually sort of a surprise.
you at the wishing well, long before I knew you'd be each page of my diary. I love the boy who kicked the sand long before the arms made the man. What inspired me to make movies at all in the first place was Beat Happening themselves as a band, because I felt that if I could do for a movie what they did for music, like to just take it on the level of your own experience and your own passion and your own desire to do it, then sure, it'll work. So kind of in conjunction with that inspiration, I, did some films.
You can feed me, you can breed me, you can need me, you can read me, or Dutch treat me even better. Make a movie, mail a letter, you're so groovy, misbehaving, sock it to me, double dating, overstaying, always waiting. You can break me, you can rate me, you can trade me, you can save me, overrate me, celebrating a new Satan. All the trimmings, extra sinning, total fitness, keep on walking, need a witness, keep on talking, skin is feeling, getting rotten. Got a feeling you really started something. Don't touch my bikini. Smile when you see me, you can stare, that's a freebie. Don't touch my bikini. Looking is free, but touching's gonna cost you something. Spanky, got no heater, extra blankie, parking meter, go to heaven, go to Paris, 7-Eleven, Roger Maris, take a cocktail, take a postcard, you're so heavy, you're so honey, getting ready, Easter bunny, rockin' steady, making money, toasting vegans, that's not funny, skater Betty, way too sexy, you're so on it, you're so honest, you can fool me, you can school me, all the teachers never told me, heavy breathing, hunting season, there's no reason we can't form a plan. Don't touch my graffiti. Smile if you dare. Holy oink is everywhere. Keep watching you graffiti. Next time you'll learn that touching's gonna cost you something.
I wanted to be in a band so bad that I would have been anything, and someone had to write a song. So, like, I never thought I could write a song. I didn't go into it intentionally thinking like I'm going to be a songwriter.
I was like, what happened to Tiger Trap? Oh, we broke up. I was like, oh, that's too bad. But I thought, no sense letting a great name like that go to waste. So I wrote this song called A Tiger Trap, and then she was like, oh, hey, we're Tiger Trap, and we want to come and play in Olympia. I'm like, oh, you are? That's good.
This is the story, and this is the truth story, okay? When we were listed on the IPU programs and posters as Tiger Trap, months later, Calvin said, whatever happened to this band Tiger Trap? Because it took quite a while, because that was in August, and we didn't start playing till January. And somewhere within there, he said, what happened to this band Tiger Trap? And since we hadn't done anything, someone said, I don't know, I think they broke up or something. Like we had never existed, but nobody knew that. And so he said, well, that's a really good name, I'm going to use it. So he wrote that song. I still sometimes think that the whole reason that we're on K is because Calvin felt guilty for stealing our name for his song, because we had it first. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. I just can't believe that. I mean, I went from being a total K kid and being really into K and loving all these bands, and I don't know how I was lucky enough to get them involved in what I was doing. Like that they've put so much faith in me, and like I still feel kind of giddy about it sometimes. Like I'm excited about the fact that I get to be on K, because I still think they're awesome.
We started calling ourselves the Pounding Surfs. The origin of that name was just because I think everyone was either doing like landscaping or manual work at the time. It just kind of made sense that we were all kind of poor and impoverished in that way. So then we wrote, they had a bunch of songs. Brian Elliott wrote a bunch of songs. Frank had written some songs. I wrote a few. And we went down and recorded them with Calvin Johnson and Pat Maley at Yo-Yo Studios when it was in a chicken coop, place that Pat called the Yogurt Farm. And then the record didn't come out for a couple years because I moved to New York and Pounding Surfs were in the process of becoming the band Gravel. And that record came out, I don't know, maybe 90, 89 or something on K.
I was playing guitar one time along with the metronome, trying to, you know, get my rhythm right or whatever. And this roommate came up and he said, oh, and he just had so much equipment. He fixed guitars and worked in a shop and stuff in Ottawa. And he came up and he said, you know, oh, don't use that. Use like just an old drum machine or something. And he pulls up this, the Drummer 2002, and plugged it in, and I wrote 2 songs like that. I was like, this is awesome, you know? And I just started playing guitar, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to tape these and send them to Paul, because I thought Paul's going to love this stuff. And then that night I was going to sleep, and I listened to it, and I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty good, you know? The next day I called up some friends who were having a show that Friday, and I said, hey, can I open up for you guys? And I played them the music over the phone, and they were like, totally. Like, because I'm like, here's my new thing. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just play this drum machine. I'm just going to play guitar. Like, no singing, nothing. Just whatever. And they were like, yeah, totally. What are you called? And so, I, you know, it's like cover the mouth, ask my roommates, and they're like, somebody said Wandering Lindy. And I said, oh, I don't want my name in it. And they said Wandering Lucy. And I'm like, okay. And then I started playing shows as Wandering Lucy, and everybody was like, you sound just like Beat Happening, or, you know, you sound just like Beat Happening, or whatever, you know? And so it's just that here I was doing that music, and I didn't even know any of these bands, but it was pretty well the same thing.
See that opens up. The aperture, of course, opens up. The iris just. I wanted the music to do that too, and then closes up. One of the reasons that I think Kay releases a lot of my scores is because the music tends to be strong enough to stand on its own. Because of my approach towards film music writing, I think lends itself, you know, in a concert atmosphere. They have had nothing but complete faith in me and what I do. The only thing that I find perplexing is why they still want me.
I remember Calvin was down in Portland one time, and he was reading this Andy Warhol book, and he was talking about how he really respected how Andy Warhol had made the factory and had made this place where people had this space to create. And I just remember him being that, he was really impressed by that. And I suddenly realized many, many years later that that's what he had made for, not for himself, but for his community, was this place where people could access space, equipment, technology, art, you know. You'll walk into Kay at any one time and all sorts of crazy shit's happening.
I've always been very entertained, if not like surprised and totally stoked on everything that's come out of the Kay situation. But I've never been surprised that it kept going. I never been surprised that it kept growing. I never been. I've always just assumed that Calvin was going to be doing what he's doing.
I don't know. I always admired Calvin just because he had such a sense of community. For me, you know, I grew up in a small town, and you know, the thing I wanted to do was just get out of there. Yeah. And I, you know, even though I knew everyone in town, I didn't especially want to. And my whole thing was, you know, and something I was able to do with Ock was to start communicating with people in Malaysia and Australia and in Sweden and places that I thought that I would never get to, and I probably won't get to most of them. And so I was interested in that whole worldwide thing. And Calvin, for him, it was kind of bringing the world to his community.
I've never really been able to like make this jump to, you are a record label and you have this huge office now. It's like, when I think about it, and it's like I've always been a huge, tremendous cheerleader for Kay, and like in terms of like when I'm touring and like how I respond to people and what I want to tell them about. And so sometimes I think that I'm like, I live in the past a little bit.
I'm a Calvinist now.
But it's nice to know that Kay is just there when I need them. Like when I decide to put out a record, they'll put it out.
basically, you know, the way I saw this building is what we want to do is just build this. Let's just have an art factory. You know, we'll have the whole building eventually. You know, when the brewery moves out, we'll just move into that side of the building too. Not us, but somebody. You know, somebody will be in there doing something interesting, and we just want to fill the building with people who want to do their thing.
You're a glass-eyed tiger, I'm a rusty fire hydrant. You're a freshly withered spider, I'm an awkward silence. You got sand in your swimsuit, I got a missing tooth. You took the last piece, didn't you? Well, I hit myself one first. Can't keep chasing around anymore. My dialing finger is getting too sore. Hey, you had to prove it. Great disturbance in the force. Those are all heaped in a pile on the floor. Let's bulldoze our way to a brand new piece of core. How many times can we break then make up and a gun to long for a kiss to save us? Hey, you're a big tech pilot, I'm a burrow in a stall. You suffer frequent all-nighters, I curl up and sleep it off. Discouraging the way you pick out the night light. I give you hundreds of last chances and can't answer myself why. Don't worry about all your reversible talk, as significant as the death of alternative rock. Let it die, let it die, let it die. You're a prima ballerina on a collapsing iron lung. You let disaster come between us.